Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Happy hump day, whoop whoop. Happy Wednesday to each and every one of you. Okay, if you remember last month, I did a little demo on how I pick threads and I used 3 of these blocks, okay? And as promised, I was going to show you Quilt As You Go method. There are several out there, but this one is my favorite. So I went ahead and got all of these together with Quilt As You Go. Now, these were orphan blocks for me, okay? They were actually part of a project that I just decided we're moving on. So I had them extra, okay? And that might be your story too. Maybe you have a lot of orphan blocks. This is a great way for those blocks to get them quilted first and then put them all together. But let's be real. One of the major reasons to do Quilt As You Go is because we have a tiny throat on our machine and we have a monster of a quilt, okay? And we are very, very hesitant to jam that quilt into that tiny throat and try to get it quilted, right? So this method allows you to quilt each block separately and then add them together with simple stitching. So I'm not going to talk no more. I'm going to go ahead and get Quilt As You Go for this video started now. I'll see you in just a sec. The first thing that you want to do is if you're doing it like me, 1 block at a time, you want to make sure that you know the size of your block. This particular block is 10.5 inches. Currently, we call that unfinished. The reason that's important is because we want to know what the finished size is, okay? So a finished size of your quilt block is the size it will be once it's inside the quilt and all of the other blocks have been attached to it. So if it's 10.5 unfinished, I know that this will be finished in the quilt at 10 inches. And that is important because that's the size that you're going to cut your batting. Okay, you want to cut your batting for your blocks to the finished size. So I cut this piece at 10 inches. Okay. Once you've done that, you also want to get your backing under control. So I actually cut my backing cattywampus. I just cut a piece of backing material and no rhyme or reason. I got a little bit extra down here. I got a lot of extra up there. But what's important is I gave myself extra on all the sides, okay? Now, yeah, I could move the batting over and make it more centered, but we're going to trim this backing material up later. Why I like to use a little bit extra is because when I go to quilt this, I want that room so I can grab onto something that I'm quilting and not be right at the edge, okay? So that's first and foremost. Now we're going to go ahead, once we have our batting cut, our backing ready, we're going to go ahead and start to sandwich this. So you want to put your backing material so it's right side facing the table, okay? Then you'll put your batting on top. And last but not least, you will want to add your block. Now what's important, there's a couple of things, guys, and you're going to see what I'm talking about more specifically in the next clip. But what's important is that you try to get this centered as best as possible, leaving yourself that 1/4 inch all the way around on each side. Okay? Once you have figured that out, you're going to want to go ahead and sandwich this. Now you can use spray basting, you could use pins, you could use fusible batting. Yep, that would be easy. You could use free fuse. You could thread baste it if you wanted. Any way that you would like to baste these is up to you, but it does need to be basted and ready to go so that the next step we can quilt it. A couple of tips just for the quilting idea. One of the things that you want to do when you go to quilt this, you want to make sure that you are not going about 3/8 to 1/2 inch. Give yourself some leadway and don't quilt past it. So I will tell you, and you'll see it here soon, I forgot once And so one of the things I started to do is I would take my ruler, okay, and I would use a marking tool and give myself a line to remind myself, don't quilt there, okay? Don't quilt to that point. And I could go a little bit further in. I'm going to do about 3/8 instead. So it just makes it easy, because now this marking pen is hard to see on the blue. I can see it, you might not, but I can see it. This will go away. It's the disappearing ink pen. It will go away. And if that depending on your quilt, you can mark it with anything. You could mark it with a chalk or so type pencil, or you could even take some tape, some painter's tape, and you could put a straight line-ish going down, okay? And it's just to say, hey, don't quilt here. Stop right there. Don't quilt in that area, okay? And that way I remember not to go past it, because it happens. But you want to leave that area, because when we go to start to join them, it's important that we're able to manipulate that edge, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get this basted, and I'm going to go ahead and get it quilted, and I'll see you guys in just a sec. All right, so this is the block. I've already started to work on it. I haven't finished this side, and I will tell you, I mean, you can see I've got some stitches that go, well, maybe you can't, but I've got stitches that go out and beyond. And I even went a little, I started to cut this one off because it doesn't matter, but I really had a good time. And it was like that all the way around, okay? So the first thing, and you can see there's a couple problems here. I have batting that's way too far out, right? Yes, I was stitching and wasn't thinking, okay? So how am I going to correct this? Well, to be real with you, I could just make another block and just frame this out and hung it just like this. But I don't have any more fabric that I can use that matches. And I'm sure you may be in the same predicament. So I'm choosing to fix this, okay? So just in case you do what I did and you stitch without thinking, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to work on this one with you guys. Okay, so I'm going to flip this over. It's a lot easier for me to work from the back because there's not any piecing. It's just one piece. Okay, and I'm basically going to listen. It's tedious, so grab yourself your favorite podcast or a Netflix movie or a YouTube playing in the background and sit yourself down and have a little ripping party, because I'm going to rip this the slow way, okay? Let me grab my seam ripper. Now your seam ripper has a sharp side where you cut your threads, and then it has this outside. And that's the side we want to use to do this. So basically I just get it started. And glasses would be helpful at this point if you need them. But I'm pulling towards the stitching, and then I'm putting my seam ripper in, and I'm just pulling the thread through. Pull it through the stitching, towards the stitching that I've done, not away, okay, and pull it through. Now once I get a good rhythm going, now you see my tail's getting longer and longer, and I want that tail so that I can bury the thread, okay, because that's what I want to do. And of course this piece right here is not cooperating. All right, so once you get a good rhythm, you get a nice little tail going, I want to know where to stop, right? So I'm going to flip it back over to the front, okay? And I'm going to take a tape measure. Sorry, had a moment. And remember we said that we wanted to stop somewhere between 3/8 and a half, right? So I'm going to take a pin, and I'm lining up on the 0 on the edge of my quilt top, and I'm looking about 3/8 to a half, okay? This is my half mark, this is my 3/8, and I'm going to put my pin I'm actually going to just a little bit further than 3/8, and I'm going to put it right where I would want that measurement at. And then I'm going to pick up my quilt and I'm just going to put a pin through it. Okay, so when I go to the back, I can see my pin. I don't know if you can, but it's right here. And I know that I want to stop right about there. So what I'll do, and I'm not going to keep doing this with you all the way through, but I would just keep pulling this stitch until I reached that area that I need to stop. Okay, so I have done another one where I've pulled the stitch up until this pin. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually pull the pin out, because I actually check out front, make sure that it's going to look good in that area. I've got enough up through here and we're okay. And I normally pull it up through to the top of the quilt, but you guys can't hardly see any of that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull that pin out. Okay. And that's the one we did together. I'm going to pull this thread up. So instead of just looping it through and pulling this thread, there's a loop that forms when you pull it towards you. So I'm going to get my seam ripper in here on the non-sharp side, because if you do the sharp side, what happens is it starts to shred the thread, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to pull the bobbin or the top thread up. Okay, so here I have 2 threads, and at this point I can go ahead and tie them off. Whoop, there's one. Just making a little knot, and I'm sorry if I'm moving the camera a bunch. I'm trying not to. We're still not completely set up yet. Okay, so now I've got a little knot. I'm grabbing a self-threading needle. You don't have to use a self-threading needle. You can simply put your threads through the eye, but this just makes things a little easier because there's a notch on top that you pull your threads to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick up my quilt top here so I can put it in my hand, and I'm going to put my needle right down into one of the holes of which it came out. And notice that I have the needle going towards the quilt. We don't want it to go away from the quilt because we're going to cut some of this, and I don't want any kind of threads being loosey-goosey and something happen. So I'm going through, and I'm always going to make sure that I didn't go all the way through the top of the quilt. I'm actually going through the batting, but not through the top of the quilt. The next thing I'm going to do is check to make sure that where my needle comes out, that my thread is longer than that. Okay, and a good amount, because then it'll allow us to do the next step. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just simply, and again, glasses are helpful, put it right through the top of that self-threading needle, and I'm going to pull my thread through. Now don't yank it. If it gets difficult, I like to take a pair of tweezers. Tweezers can be your friend too, because we all know Jack isn't. And I just simply pull that thread through. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to one of the threads, hold on to the quilt right about where it went in, and I'm just going to pull on it a little. And what I'm doing, up there it went. I know you couldn't hear it, and I know you can't feel it, but there was a little pop. The reason you're waiting for that pop is because that tells me that my knot went into the fabric. Okay, then I'm just going to take my snips, and I love the curved ones because it helps prevent cutting a hole, and I'm just going to snip it, give it a little rub, and my thread is buried. Okay, so I will tell you that putting that pin in and knowing where to stop is a blessing, because I'm trying to find the one. I kept on going over here. I think it's over here. It looks like this one. So I just kept on pulling and pulling, and I forgot that I needed to look to see where I needed to stop. So having that pin there to tell you is a blessing. Okay, so now once you have all of your threads buried and you've pulled back your quilting, all right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of some of this extra batting. So I'm going to do this side. You want to wait. It's best if you wait till you have all of your quilting unstitched and buried, all your threads, to do this next part. So what I'm honestly going to do is I'm going to pull back. I was testing some methods. I didn't like it. So I'm going to pull back my backing, okay? And I'm going to grab my janky scissors. They're my fabric scissors, but Michael has some really nice ones. I don't have any nice ones yet. And I'm going to start to cut away. Now, there's a stitch right here. I don't know if you can see it. I don't want to hit any stitches. However, you want to get close to it because we need it to be less than your topper. Now, I will also tell you, you want to make sure that you are in fact not cutting your top fabric, okay? So I do a little snip. Whoop, I started to grab it. Pull it through, keep checking, and you're just going to cut all the way till the end of the quilt. And I'm not worried if it's perfectly straight. I'm not worried about, you know, being exact measurements, because I know that I've pulled my stitches out to about where it should stop. Oh, I almost grabbed it again. So you just want to keep checking. You got to do this very carefully. Okay. Whoop, I'm getting a little far away. Okay. All right, and finish it off. And then you will have, and if you need to cut more, that's fine, because see, now I can see more, but I'm okay. So now I have it where all the other ones are, okay? I've got my batting pulled out. I've got my stitches nice and pretty. So once you finish, if you have to correct, you're going to go to do the normal thing. I pray that you don't have to do this, okay? It's kind of a rigmarole and it takes a while. But I just wanted to show you in case you did. All right. So the next step is once you have all of your blocks quilted and ready to go, okay? And all, if you need, I buried, well, some of these I tacked. I just did back stitching. That was kind of fun with my machine, but I did. So instead of doing any burying of threads, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to simply cut right along your quilt top, okay, to get rid of the backing. That's all we're going to do. Just make sure you do not cut your quilt top. And you're going to cut all four sides to be even. So I'm going to, and I'm just pulling this down because I'm just going to go ahead and make it somewhat straight here because this part doesn't matter. There we go. All right. And I'm just going to keep turning the quilt top and cutting, turning and cutting until all four sides of every quilt block is cut. Okay. Then I am going to go ahead and finish this up. I'll make it look like this one where it's going to have all four sides cut, and then we'll go to the next step. So I'll see you guys in just a sec. Once you have all your blocks quilted, now the fun begins. Okay, so we want to start to add our blocks together. Make sure that you lay them out as you so wish, making sure that we put them together in the right direction. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your block and place it right sides together. And I've already done what I'm about to show you with the back side. But you're going to take your backing fabric and you're going to fold it down. And you'll want to pin them, the backing, you want to pin it down so it stays out of the way while you're quilting. So you just go through and give it a few pins. Now notice that I am pinning, you know, some people might think of this as like a left-hander because normally we pin from the other direction. But I don't want to run into any pins when I'm stitching these together. So all I want to do is just hold them down. Okay. And I do tend to pin the edges just so it does stay out of the way also, because you know they're a little loosey-goosey. And the next thing I am going to do, this particular, I don't know if yours will have this or not, but both of these blocks have seams where they actually line up. Okay, so I have this seam actually lines up with this one and this one with that one. So what I'll do is I'll actually nest the seams so that I know that everything is straight. And this is just my preference. Now I am pinning this normally because I'll pull it as I cross it. Okay, and I'm going to take you to the sewing machine because I just have a couple things to point out. But I'll get the rest pinned, and all we're simply going to do, so you want to do that to both sides, okay? So this side is also pinned back, the backing is, and this side the backing's pinned back, okay? And we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch these together. So I'll see you in just a sec. One thing you will notice, my pins are all still here, and I do have a walking foot loaded. Now it's not required because you're only going through a couple of layers, but because we have all this craziness going on, I went ahead and I was working with another project and I went ahead and left it, and I'm finding it to be a lot easier. So all you're wanting to do is just really stitch these together very carefully, okay? Trying to stay away from the batting and just get them sewn together. Now I'm going to get a little further here, and I have one more other tip. When you start and stop, you want to, I personally would suggest that you do a little back stitch, and then I have marked on both ends where my 1/4 inch is, and I don't know that you'll be able to see it in the camera, but at the beginning and the end I have marked a 1/4 inch to each end. Reason being, I want, oh yeah, we're in here now. Now you can't see it, I don't think, but I've made a little mark right here that's a 1/4 inch. It's right below a little bit of the pin. Now you could also pin at the 1/4 inch and that would tell you, but the whole purpose to that is I'm going to stop at that 1/4 inch and I'm going to do a little back stitching to hold it and make sure it doesn't begin to start on getting unraveled. But it'll also help when we go to put the rows together. So we are, you know, I'm only doing a 4 patch, right? So I had 2 on one row and I'll have 2 on another row, but you might have 6 on one row. You might have 5 on a row. So you get all the rows put together, and then you're going to do the same method, pulling back the backing fabric and everything. And I'll show you in the next clip, but because of that, it will make it so much easier if you go ahead and give yourself a reminder of where to stop and do a little back stitch. So I'll go ahead and get this one done, and I'll show you what I mean when you go to put your rows together. Little back stitch, and then cut threads. See you in just a sec. This is what we have. This is exactly how it turned out. I absolutely love this, but let's flip it over, guys. So I took out all the pins. Woo. So I took out all the pins, and this is what we have. So we do have to get this closed up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my iron, And I'm just going to press this seam going down. Okay, make it nice and pretty. And then to close it up, I'm actually going to, there's a couple things you can do, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fold it over, okay, and I'm going to press it, giving myself a really nice straight line, okay, and I'll go and do this all the way up. Let me go ahead and pull this up just a bit so you can see it, okay, and by doing this, so what am I going to do to keep it closed? Because it's not going to stay closed, right, unless we sew it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew it down. Now I will tell you, some people like to hand stitch it closed, and that's fine. And what the difference is, the really big difference besides speed, right? The big difference is if you hand stitch it, you're not going to see anything on the front. If you do this by machine, you will have another line on the front. So let me show you what I mean. I've already done that to the other block, okay? The other row. This is, remember, oh, I gotta bury that thread. So it's already joined together. I've already stitched it down, okay? So what you'll see is I have another seam line in here where I stitched it down. Now I know it's probably hard for you to see, but I can definitely see it. So you're going to have to stitch it down. If you don't mind the line, you'll go ahead and do this by machine. If you don't want this extra line, then you will have to do it by hand, okay? So then you just simply stitch it down and you're ready to sew your row together. So once you have all your blocks sewn into rows, then you sew the rows together. I always hate saying that because I feel like it's confusing. Okay, so if you also notice there's a little bit of a gap in here that may not show a whole lot of quilting. So one thing some people do is they'll go back in here and do some extra quilting. I am not one of those people today, so I'm not going to. It's going to be left just like this, and I think it's gorgeous. So we're good. All right. Once you have your rows together, you're going to repeat the exact same method to get the rows sewn together. I always hate saying that. Okay. So what I've done here, and this is also why it's important that you start down 1/4 inch so you can actually fold down your backing and it will connect, okay? I mean, it will fold down and it won't, if you sew all the way to the end, you're not going to have enough to fold down and get this so you do the same method. So that's why I'm telling you that. And it same thing goes when you sew these together. I've already messed it up. I'm going to start 1/4 inch from the bottom. Okay, I'm not going to stitch from the bottom. I'm going to start about 1/4 inch from the bottom and then sew up. So then again, I will be able to pull back that backing fabric so I can stitch just like I did before. Same method, just a longer seam, right? Okay, so let me come back at you. That is Quilt As You Go. Let me come right back at you. I'll see you in a sec. Well, you've seen this before from the beginning. I guess it's over here. So you've seen it before in the beginning, but now we're seeing it again, as this is our finished Quilt As You Go method. I did a wall hanging because these 4 blocks are part of the same fabric line, and that's how I really wanted to put this thing all together. I think it'd be just so super cute. Now notice it's not binded. Yes, I know. I will get that done, I hope, before this afternoon when we go live at 3 p.m. However, in the meantime, I want to add a couple of things. First and foremost, if when you're turning your back side, under and you're stitching the back side down. If you're having trouble with it sticking down and keeping straight as much as you like, one tip I would give is to use a little glue. You know, I love me some Roxanne's glue when I'm doing my binding. Well, this is another method or another thing that you could use that glue for. Instead of just pressing it down with your iron, even if you're hand stitching, instead of just pressing it, you can actually press it and just tack a little bit of glue in there, and it will stay for you exactly where you want it. So that is one option, one little tip I wanted to add. The other thing is, I only did this with a 2x2, 4 blocks, right? But a lot of you may want to do this with more blocks. Couple of things I want to add. You don't have to do the quilting with one block at a time. You could do one row at a time to quilt. Now that means that you're going to have more to contend with within the throat of your machine. However, you'll have less joining, right? So if I had 4 going across and 4 going down, I could tackle it using the same method by first putting the 4 blocks together, just regular, like a topper. Then adding the batting to the finished size of that row, and then putting the backing on, fusing them all together, getting that whole row quilted, and then just quilting all 4 rows and then joining them. Okay, so I wanted to add this in there because it doesn't have to be each and every block individual. You can chunk it. Okay, works fantabulous. Another thing that you may like to do if you want sashing in those blocks, okay, I would add the sashing to each block first, that, you know, making sure you don't double your sashing. So you don't need to put one on the top and on the bottom that goes in between. You only have to have one of those blocks with sashing. But I would do it prior to quilting it, then add the batting to the finished size, put the backing on, fuse it, quilt it, and then you can join them. That actually works really well too. Just a little heads up for that. It can add a little oomph. Now there's other methods to add sashing with Quilt As You Go. Perfectly fine, whichever method floats your boat. But I really did want to just reiterate, because I didn't put sashing in here, and I very well could have if I would have had the fabric. Trick here is you got to have the fabric, right? So I elected just to add the blocks, but you can in fact add the sashing. So those were a couple of things that I wanted to add. I'm going to attempt to get this bound before this afternoon, like I said before. I hope you'd enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, right, put them in the down below in the comments. We'll be sure to get back to you. I hope I will see you with a bound wall hanging by today, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, when we do our live quilting and answer session right here on YouTube, and we will also be at the same time on Facebook to come to you wherever it is that you find home for you. So look forward to seeing you with Mayhem at 3 p.m. for our live quilting and answers, live Q&A. But until next time, guys, may you all continue to be inspired, productive, ever so joyful, never stop believing, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. We love y'all. Happy quilting. Whoop whoop. Happy hump day. See you all soon.